everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 3 of the Beyond Insights podcast. Very excited to be here, and I'm here with Gareth MacBeth today, who is one of our lead engineers at Syft. So today we're talking about all things cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a really important topic. Today you can do just about everything online, from shopping to email, banking, remote work, and cybersecurity has been in the news a lot lately because there are so many hacks, even on like very, very big companies and big websites. So lots of, even big companies can be very vulnerable to cyber attacks. So I thought we would talk to Gareth today about how you can make sure that your data is secure.
Great. Thanks for having me on. I don't claim to be a cybersecurity expert, but I've been at Syft now for the past 5 years. I've definitely been experienced and I've become acclimatized to the best practices one should follow in an organization for security. And in doing so, obviously implemented a whole bunch ourselves from the get-go. And now we're just going to basically discuss how we as our organization have secured ourselves and how you as an organization or individual can ensure that you follow these best practices to ensure your own security on the internet.
So maybe you can give us a bit of a background about yourself, about your time at Syft, what you were doing before, what led you to be here today.
Perfect, yeah. So as I said, I joined Syft Analytics around 5 years ago. Then I joined as one of 2 engineers. We have now experienced exponential growth to about 20 engineers and to a team size of around 70-ish, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's been quite a ride. And it's great to be in a startup because you experience a lot of small business struggles, as well as how to solve key problems and actually see direct results from what you do. When I joined, I had come directly from university, so I studied in Stellenbosch, which was a beautiful wine country. From that point onwards, I think I interned in the year prior to me joining for about a month or so, and then I joined along with the founders one of their first companies, and then moved over shortly after to Syft Analytics.
So Gareth has really been here through all the many phases of Syft. Even since I've joined, we've seen so many things changing, and you've really been there for it all. Very, very cool.
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, and it's obviously a lot more exciting stuff to come from Syft, which is great.
Sure. So why are we talking about cybersecurity today? Why is this something that you think people should be aware of and should be investing time and money in?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much your first line of defense, your security. Doesn't matter if you've got your intellectual property, your data, your client security, as well as your own personal information. You should always guarantee that it is as secure as possible. So in essence, you should never be experiencing concerns or going to sleep at night being is there a concern that my data is out there? Has my card details been leaked? Or just general concerns like that. So with the growing move to everyone going to cloud and the world going more tech-driven, it makes sense that security should become the number one focus for all users and individuals and organizations. And in doing so, we'll also talk about the key points on that today, but obviously there's always going to be chances that people can get through, but we can only ensure that we follow the best practices that what we are aware of present.
Sure. So what are some of your top tips that you can recommend for organizations?
Obviously there's the key ones. So as an organization, you just have to ensure strict security policies. So at Syft, for example, we undergo biannual every 6 months security training, as well as an ongoing security audit throughout the year. And in doing so, just include your standard stock basics, such as passwords. Passwords, for example, obviously the usual must be super ambiguous. They shouldn't relate back to you.
And although it seems your birthday or
exactly.
First name or
anything,
anything.
Identifiable facts.
Yes.
Yeah. And although it seems like common sense, more often than not, you'd be surprised at how much it is not common sense. So it's just your standard things with passwords. A more key one nowadays would be VPNs or virtual private networks. And the reason that's so key is especially driven by remote work. So virtual private networks allow a remote worker or a remote employee to access key company resources or the intranet remotely through a secure tunnel or through a secure network. That's become more and more critical as the years have gone.
I think especially, often people work at the airport and they like to use the free airport Wi-Fi. And I know you've told me this is really not advisable. Why is that?
In essence, public Wi-Fi, whenever you access a network that you do not have control of, that you don't know how it's been set up or configured, you don't know the security behind it, you should always be cautious to what you put on and how you access it. that VPNs do help eliminate some of that risk, as it does anonymize who you are on the network. But at the same time, you are always at risk if you're on a public network. So it's always better to either use just your mobile data, a hotspot, but you should never ever, with company resources, access public network without pre-authorization.
And in terms of getting your team trained on all the important things for security, what would you recommend?
Well, I mean, there's many practices. So as I said, the security training once every 6 months, or more frequent if you that's what suits your business. But whether or not that sticks with with your employees is up to them. But another great security practice that you can follow is also just your standard like phishing attempts. So you can set up fake scenarios within the business to see how well your employees are stuck with a certain like key aspect. For example, phishing. So you could send out fake phishing emails to see which of your employees click on those emails. Although it sounds like entrapment, it's not in essence that. It's just to ensure that we can then reiterate the risks that then are posed by these kind of vulnerabilities, and just how cautious you have to be when dealing with confidential data.
Well, it's kind of like I've received a few emails that are supposed to be from Van, our CEO, asking if he can just talk to me about something or if he can borrow money from me.
Yeah.
It's kind of being alert to those kind of emails that there's something a little bit weird about this. Why would he want me to be lending him money?
Yeah, and they always tell you not to go and contact them in person. So, I mean, if that's not a red flag, and people do that, which I wouldn't be surprised if they do, it's a red flag in our books.
And what do you think are some of the biggest risks for data security?
I mean, there's many. The list is ever growing. The more and more we move to cloud and more we go towards fully tech-driven society. But the major ones are obviously cyber attacks, as I've mentioned, phishing, malware, and ransomware. So to just top on that, so phishing is basically, as Alex said, where people try and impersonate someone else within the business to try and give you to voluntarily give up confidential data. And then ransomware is also one where if you're accessing either downloading applications that aren't authorized or suspicious applications, or opening certain files from a website that then get into your system and then prevent you from accessing your computer, or worse, if you connect to your company's intranet, prevent you from accessing your actual company data.
And that's called ransomware because they hold your data ransom, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of like they're kidnapping your data.
Yeah, they generally give you like a timeline or certain things to abide by, or you have to give up data for them to release certain aspects. So it's literally the worst case scenario. So thankfully it shouldn't be that common for the individual at all. It's more for your companies and your corporate enterprises that should be at risk of that. And that's why we have these strict security processes.
And I guess that's why you need to make sure that none of your employees are downloading random apps or random files. They're always checking everything before they download it.
Exactly. So at the individual level, sure, that's 100% on you to to ensure that you always check your files and make sure that you're downloading things that are authentic. But on the company level, you can also ensure these strict security policies. So if you're using Google Workspace, so where you have all your custom domains, so at syftanalytics.com or any of your business domains, you can ensure that first you filter all the emails prior so they can run through virus checks, all that kind of stuff. So you can at least have that first line of defense before it reaches the employee. So even if there is a risk, at least that way, it's completely isolated, removed from the network, doesn't ever make it to you, which is a great start. And then
you can also, in terms of downloading applications, there are
yes.
certain restrictions you can put in place, right?
Exactly. So you get things called MDM, so like Apple MDM and Google, which is a multi-device manager in essence. It prevents you can start putting restrictions on what applications are allowed within your company. So we've got strict restrictions on our systems that you can't download any unauthorized apps. So it has to be fully pre-authorized, comes from the App Store, can't be a browser download, for example. And all of those things obviously run through checks with permanent monitoring on all employees' laptops that we'd be alerted to if there was even a potential risk for that.
I suppose because one of the biggest risks working within a business is the third-party software that you work with, and making sure, especially if you're an accounting practice or any kind of business working with financial data or any kind of very confidential data, you want to make sure that any software that is handling that data is secure.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the biggest risk, obviously, with third party is you can only be as secure as you want to be internally as an organization. However, when you start using third-party applications, which is inevitable and more often than not unavoidable, the security controls are out of your hands. That falls onto the third party. So if ever they introduce a vulnerability or any risks on their side, you have no control, nor are you generally exposed to what these vulnerabilities are. It's only once it's too late that then you figure out what the problem was. So there's always obviously a risk with third parties. So it's why you just got to vet them from the get-go, see what their security compliance is, and do they follow best security practices. It's always good to start a conversation with their customer success teams, follow up with that kind of stuff. But yeah, you've always got to vet your third-party applications.
And I know you also mentioned the other day compromised devices or compromised networks. Those are also really big risks.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's why you have got to have strict firewall processes in place and like policies. So our network obviously is completely locked down in the office. You can't access certain things you can't access any company like information unless you're on our network. There's a lot of secure things you can do with that. So basically, we don't even have support VPNing. If you want to access the system, you have to be in the office. There's obviously a lot of things that can go wrong that we are only aware of once it has. So that's why we look at what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the world, and we proactively try and prevent that issue from happening.
Yeah, so just want to prevent it rather than treat it later on.
And with like compromised devices, the problem with if you have a company intranet or like if you've got anything on premises, so like any hard drives or data that's physically stored for clients on premises, if someone with a compromised device or someone who's got a virus or ransomware, for example, on the device plugs into the network, it can then upload itself automatically to the intranet, which then can immediately take down your systems. So we have strict policies on that as well. So we never have devices plugged into the network. So there's no direct connection by cable, as well as everything goes through 2 firewalls before it reaches the actual like system request. As well as we also don't do anything on premises because there's a lot of risks involved with that as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
No.
Trying to remember what I was going to ask you next.
Well, I mean, I can keep going on potentially like threats. Like another one, which in essence, we've touched on a few aspects of it, but it's something called insider threats, which sounds like malicious, but it's not always intended to be malicious. So by insider threats, it's like employees of the business can either compromise data or leak data. Sometimes there are malicious attempts where they physically got higher privileges than someone else, and now they're going to like misuse that privilege to leak confidential data or share user information. But then you also get the non-intentional, like the users who don't realize that they're doing it. So it can send it like with a compromised device, where now they plug into the internet and now it starts key logging or scraping on like your screens and stuff and sending that out to the public. That's like an unintended, but in essence, it's an internal threat that you've got to always ensure that you are protected against.
It's basically that thing that you're only as strong as your weakest link.
Exactly.
So if you're looking at that in terms of your employees, you need to make sure that the weakest link of your employees, they know a bit about cybersecurity, about how to keep data safe, and also that you have the principle of least privilege in place.
Exactly.
Which maybe you can talk a bit about what that means.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I'd say principle of least privilege is definitely one of my favorite security practices that one can follow, and it should be like the industry standard, which it generally is accepted in the bigger corporates now. And what principle of least privilege is pretty much exactly that. You give someone the least amount of privileges that they need in order to execute their job effectively and efficiently. So that way you don't get the potential internal threat where a user has higher privileges than they should and then starts maliciously using it, as well as there's no unintended someone who accidentally leaks it.
Yes.
And you just got to continually do these reviews. So you've got to do like those internal like security reviews, how much permissions people have. If I had, for example, access to our systems, but now I've moved from engineering to revenue, I don't need access to our code anymore. So that must be immediately revoked from me. We need to do these like checks permanently, and it should be something that's reviewed weekly, if not monthly, in a organization, just to ensure, especially if you have people offboarded, that there's no excess permissions lying around that someone can actually misuse. And yeah.
Right, yeah, definitely very important when someone's leaving the organization that you get rid of all the access that they had to that information, confidential information. That's what I was looking for.
Nice. Yeah, well, the best part with offboarding is, so we follow a strict process from an external company who does all of our like auditing of our systems and auditing of our business practices. So they keep us in check basically to make sure we are following all these industry practices. Anytime a new like industry standard comes in, they enforce that, we enforce it kind of thing. So it's great. So they've got a permanent audit running on us across our entire organization. And then one of those is physically checking, do we have offboarding processes in place? Have they can see all our systems and see, has that person been offboarded from all the systems, flag it immediately, does anyone have excess permissions? So although it does take the load off from us from having to manage us all the time, it is always good practice to never just trust the software outright. You must always do things and double check them yourselves.
And I suppose one of the other big security practices that we have at Syft is penetration testing, which is, as I understand it, you're trying to protect the software from potential hackers. So you're trying to look at any kind of weaknesses that there might be.
Yeah. So it's essentially, yeah, so it's preventing it from hackers by hacking the system.
Yes.
So we obviously have staging environments of things that are completely separate to our production systems. So that way, obviously, while we're doing these tests and running these tests, we can't affect any like production system, we can't impact clients, and nor can we ever impact their information because it's completely detached.
But it really kind of mimics our software. It's like a copy of what Syft looks like.
Exactly. It's a one-to-one version of Syft without the data. It's just with obviously test data.
Yes.
And the biggest pro to this is that you can catch vulnerabilities before they even reach the production system. So we ourselves do penetration testing internally, where we run all these tests, be like, okay, well, can we like modify any of the data coming back or going to our servers? Can we basically maliciously act on the data to get data that's not ours, or mutate it to just damage the system? So we also do a lot of internal testing on that, but at the same time, we have a full penetration testing suite as well as external penetration testers as well. For any potential high risk changes, we'll get them involved and they'll test our systems, which currently they're testing 7 days a week, 24/7. So it's great now. I've got a new policy in place. And as I say, is whether our system's secure or not, it's only secure up until this point, until another vulnerability is announced globally, for example, like a sign-up process with the multi-factor authentication. They can inform us of this immediately, and then we can then work proactively to quickly fix that before it becomes a problem for us.
Oh, amazing. It's a continuous process. I think that's also the important thing that I've learned about cybersecurity. It's not like a once-off concern. You have to constantly be reviewing your practices, especially as hackers and other cyber criminals get more clever and they've figured out different ways to get into your system. You need to keep thinking about cybersecurity.
Exactly. So, I mean, you can be a cybersecurity today, and then tomorrow a massive vulnerability comes up, and the thing that you were an expert in and you guaranteed like it was secure against, someone's found some backdoor entrance into it or some like loophole in the system that now suddenly you have to like relearn how to solve that problem. But you've got a continually growing knowledge base. That's why you have to have a security team. So you can never have one individual that's going to like head up these things purely because there is just too much out there. There's too much knowledge. So you've got to have continual keeping you in check, people keeping up to date for like API security, data security, integrity of all the systems, all that kind of stuff.
And you almost mentioned encryption there, and we can talk about encryption a bit.
Yeah, 100%. So a super important thing is obviously never ever transferring data or having data saved in plain text. So plain text meaning like the average user can just read the data or the information. So in essence, you should always encrypt things that you pass over the network. So as we call it, encryption in transit, as well as when you store it. So in our databases, every single bit of user data, their client's data, all their financial data is stored encrypted on the database. So even if we ourselves wanted to act maliciously inside another insider threat, we couldn't make sense of any of the data. It purely is only decrypted and viewable to the user once they have logged in and using their authentic token. So there's a lot that goes into the encryption, obviously, to ensure that there's no middleman attacks or third party. So middleman being someone who intercepts the request while you're making it to our system or while it's being returned to us to basically modify certain aspects of it. But we've got a lot of things in place for that, and that's where penetration testing comes in helpful, because they can try and commit all these crimes in essence for us to solve them. And as such, I mean, it's been successful to date. So,
what's the most surprising thing that you've learned about cybersecurity?
Well, to be fair, it's not necessarily the cybersecurity itself that's been surprising. It's the fact that a lot of businesses, SaaS businesses being a prominent one as well, feel that security should be a privilege, so they're only generally offered on the higher plans. When moving to cloud now, with everyone having their data online, it really should be a given that you, the user, should feel comfortable knowing that your information's out there and that your data's out there. There really shouldn't be any second thought, nor should you have to pay more to ensure that your data is more secure than the next person. It really should just be a given, which to me is still shocking.
And I think also, if I think about all of the different security checks that we have in terms of like using our software, you can have two-factor authentication. You have the principle of least privilege in terms of like our user roles. So you can give someone like admin privileges or staff privileges, or like client access is also limited. They can only see certain things.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, you should generally, obviously, we try and build roles out as generically as possible to make sense for like, as Alex was saying, for the clients or for your main, like your admin users. But I would always suggest making your own bespoke roles. As much as convenient as it is just to choose a custom pre-built role, you never know what additional permissions it's granting you. It's always better to just go and physically, even if you're ticking on the exact same things as one of our roles has predetermined, it's always better to just make sure, okay, cool, I know for a fact they have this feature or this access to this report, rather than after the fact when the user told you, oh, I didn't realize I had access to this data. And now obviously you're not necessarily in trouble, but it's just awkward conversation to have. Yeah.
Sure.
You also mentioned, remember, multi-factor authentication.
Yes.
Which is actually one thing I wanted to talk about as well in terms of like passwords. It has been a great addition. Just in general, like the industry seems to have accepted multi-factor authentication and made it like standard now across a lot of systems, which in essence, it's just another layer of protection on your password. So if you do have the guessable password of like password 123 or it's Alex 123, it adds an additional layer of security that even if I was remotely guessing that password, I need a thing physically on either my device or my laptop or something that then gives me a limited time period, a limited code, 6-digit code on average to enter in just to authenticate that.
Kind of like the OTP you get when you're trying to pay with your banking app.
Exactly that. And it just gives you an additional like peace of mind that even if someone gets your password, like your email password, you are secured against that. And a lot of our app partners have enforced this. The one that's taken charge of that, I'd say, is Xero as well. They've really gone all out that when they first rolled out, it was just for their Oz partners, like the Australia region. And now they've gone, if you integrate at all, even if you're not didn't initially come from Xero to our systems, there's now a requirement to be enforced on every single system that integrates with Xero.
That's really good.
So that's an example of how they are mitigating third-party risk.
So I was just going to say that's how, like, if you're looking at a third-party software like Xero, you can go and say, oh, okay, they are forcing us to do this multi-factor authentication. They clearly take security seriously.
That's exactly. And I mean, that's one thing that everyone can enforce. So it's doing your due diligence in essence for third-party applications as well. So if someone wants to integrate with us, we would first reach out to them, see that they meet all our minimum security requirements before we even allow them to start reaching out to our system.
I suppose we've spoken a lot about different best practices. On an individual level, what would you recommend people to do to just keep their data secure?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, it's pretty much everything we've touched on already, but just at obviously less of an intensity than what an organization or business would need. So one being VPNs. VPNs really are a great practice to use. It does sound like if you're not a tech person, like, oh no, what is a VPN? It's very easy just to enable. iPhones even have them built in nowadays. I'm pretty sure Android devices have them too. You can just literally switch it on and then it just anonymizes who you are on the internet. Prevents targeted advertising and just basically makes it that no one can know who you are on the internet and just secures all your data.
And with your passwords, when you're making a password, would you recommend doing that thing? I think Google and a few other sites have it where they recommend a password for you.
I mean, yeah, in essence, so what they're using is something that is uniquely identifiable set of characters. So it's like a super long character string. So I think it's like 32 characters on average, which is great because I mean that as long as you're more secure than the next person, so those passwords are way better than someone who's done a 12-character password. Granted, they're not easily rememberable, but that's why we have obviously all these password managers, all these authenticator apps. But it really does give you that additional layer of security because it's a completely unguessable password. It will take a computer years, if not decades, to guess those kind of passwords.
And I think the main thing is you just want to be more secure than the next person because hackers are lazy. They're going to want to go for the easiest target.
Exactly. So that's like our philosophy. So we are always going to be more secure than any of our other app partners or anyone that's in our competition, basically. Because as you say, hackers inherently are lazy. They'll always look to go to the easiest, where the low-hanging fruit is. So
maybe I should say they're opportunistic, not lazy. But
well, in essence,
we're not going to compliment hackers.
Yeah, we're not going to glamorize hackers unless they're white hat hackers. Then they're doing.
It's a white hat hacker.
Oh, so so you obviously get black hat hackers and white hat hackers. Black hat hackers act maliciously. So
it's like in the old Western movies, the bad guy would wear a black hat and then the good cowboy would wear a white hat.
I'll take your word for that. So I'm sure that's the case.
Where it comes from.
But yeah, in essence, black hat hackers are the malicious actors. So they will do it to damage your system or to get money and extort you. Whereas a white hat hacker they've learned a vulnerability. they will then go and hit all these systems globally that use that same like third-party application, and then see if they can like break the system and then report it to you so you can repair it before the black hat system.
It's kind of like that penetration testing.
It's exactly that. And more often than not, that's how they market themselves, penetration testing. So they'll initially hack you, but without the intention of like extorting anything or like there's no malicious intent.
They're actually doing you a favor, saying these are your vulnerabilities, you need to go and fix those.
That's exactly it. And then more often than not, the contract comes with it after being like, you've seen what we can do. They've done it based on like a proof of concept as to how good they are for security. And that's where they were like, propose, would we like to use us for security? So it really is it's an interesting aspect. And I'm glad they're out there, but not the black hat hackers. No.
I'm really just picturing this like a Western where they're doing like, see you at 12 noon, high noon.
Yeah, I don't know if I've watched a Western, but we can go with that. Yeah. That's epic though. It's very cool.
So, what would you like people to take away from this podcast, really? What do you think is the most important thing for people to remember?
Well, I mean, as you said, the most important thing is just be more secure than the next person. I don't want obviously anyone to take away that they should be scared of going to the cloud, because obviously, I mean, as the older generations are moving to the cloud, it can be a daunting task. They've been used to desktop software, having everything on premises. So now to them, it's like a daunting thing, like, oh, is my data out there for everyone to see? And we're not trying to like instill fear that there's all these risks. It's just that we're trying to give you key points that what are the best practices and how can you just ensure that if a hacker does come, you are just that much more secure than the next person, that they will just move on. They won't even bat an eye at you. So it's not to be scared, it's just to be cognizant of what's out there and how to keep up to date with it.
Awesome.
Epic. Oh, is that it? All done?
I think so.
Awesome.
Thank you very much to everyone for joining. I hope that you learned something today. I think Gareth needs to go watch some Westerns now so that he knows my references.
I've got a lot of things to catch up on. But yeah, no, honestly, thanks for having me. It's been actually a great talk, even though I don't normally do public things in essence, but no, it's been really, really fun to be on here. So
We were really glad to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Gareth.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for joining, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Insights podcast. Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to right now. And please share with any of your colleagues or friends or family members that you think might benefit from listening to this podcast. That's all from us. Until next time, see you then.